Welcome back to part 2 of the Mother's Day episode of the Rediscovery Journal, the podcast where healing meets honesty. I'm your host, Sophia, and each week we will dive deep into stories of self-discovery, mental health, and the raw, real moments that shape who we are. Whether you're on the journey of growth, seeking clarity, or simply need a reminder that you're not alone, you're in the right place. Let's rediscover what it means to truly know ourselves, one conversation at a time. Now, jumping back into the episode. Follow-up question in terms of parenting. So, how do you think that, or what have you noticed about me that has evolved or changed over the years?
That's a really good question. I wasn't quite expecting.
Or have I stayed completely the same?
No, you haven't stayed completely the same. You still have you have a passion. When you get involved in something or do something, you just throw yourself in. And when you decide, and I've always said this about you, when you decide that you're going to do something, like, you're just bound and determined, and you are in some ways just so successful because of that commitment. Even when you face adversity, you're like, okay, this really sucks. So I'm going to go maybe feel sorry for myself for a little bit, but I move on. I think, well, I can tell you, so when you were in the 3rd grade, you went to horseback riding camp. I don't know if you remember that either, but
Yeah, I do.
it was a week-long camp. And that was a moment where, we came to pick you up on Saturday. You were showing us how to brush the horse and clean the horse's hoof and all that stuff. And, that was a moment where I was like, oh my God, you're not like this little baby anymore. Like, you are kind of your own person. And I feel like there have been moments where I have that kind of epiphany, like probably the first time you came back from college, or really when you started to study forensic science, and then the language choices that you made were just so much more sophisticated. They were the conversation of a grown up, and very calm, but impassioned, but really enthusiastic. I don't know how to, I think you had those characteristics, but when you were younger, maybe they were a little bit kind of crazier. And I think now you kind of pick your moments when you have that passion, and people get to see that, as opposed to, always being so excited about every single thing. Like, for instance, when you were a little girl, every time we came back from a movie, we'd say, you loved movies. We'd say, Sophie, is this the best movie you've ever seen? Oh my God, this is the best movie I've ever seen. And you could even recite verses from the movie, even if you'd only seen it once. But every movie was always the best movie. Now I think you've evolved where it's not always the latest and greatest that is the best. You recognize, I might have seen something 2 years ago that I still think is the best movie that I've ever seen. And that's just an example.
Going back to the horseback riding thing, I don't think it was in 3rd grade, but I know I went several times. And the last time I went, I don't know if you knew about this because I don't think you were there, but my saddle started to come off.
You fell off, right?
No, I didn't fall off. It started to flip, and I almost got kicked in the head by the horse while riding it. But the instructor got to the horse right before, right as I flipped underneath. And so I have been scared to get on horses ever since then.
Oh, really?
As it was terrifying. I started to feel it unbuckle. I started screaming and scared the horse. So the horse started running faster and faster and faster. And she literally had to jump in front of the horse in order to, yeah.
I don't think I did know that.
Oh, well, I don't think you were there.
It would have been during, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, that was
That's
a little
scary.
Yeah. And then one thing I think is really interesting, if you're open to talk about it, is kind of the evolution of our relationship.
That's fine.
So when I was younger, I always remember kind of resenting you, not for anything that you did, but because pretty much everyone we were related to has always compared you. Not compared you to me, but compared me to you. They used to always call me Little Christy.
My family used to call you Little Christy?
All sorts of people. Everything that you did well, they were like, oh, well, you have to do well at this because Christy's good at this. And I didn't really feel like I had my own identity. I kind of felt like I was stuck in your shadow and there was nothing I could really do to get out of it. It wasn't until my senior year of high school when I really started to see you this sounds mean, and I don't mean it in a mean way, but as an individual and as a person, somebody who is separate from my identity, who I was able to get to know on a different level.
Yeah, your senior year was pretty hard.
And in the ability where you showed me who you were on a new level, and I think it just really opened up where our relationship could go from there. Versus before, I think that there was kind of that blockade of me feeling like nothing I could do would ever amount to anything as great as you were.
Mhm.
And so it made it really hard for me to get close to you because I felt like I was, oh my gosh, I'm getting emotional. I just felt like I could never like measure up to you.
Well, you know how I say that your dad is everything that I never knew that I wanted. You are so much more than I ever possibly could have imagined. And I just feel so blessed that I get to be in your life like this and know you and spend time with you and see you. I wish you could see you how I see you. Like you would just be amazed.
I mean, I think that that can be said about most people, though. We're always our harshest critics, typically.
Yeah.
Not all the time, but typically. I also feel like the relationship we have now is one that we're really fortunate to have because I don't think everybody has this level of openness with one or both of their parents. And I feel like you truly see me in a way that I don't know, sometimes I feel like I speak a different language when I talk to people, and you're always able to decipher what I'm trying to get at. And also, you're very good at being there for me the way I need someone to be there for me.
Mm, it makes me happy.
Yeah, like if I need advice, you can do that. And you've gotten a lot better with if I just want to have someone listen, you're able to like take it in and be there in a moment, even if it's not always ideal. And I feel like the sign of a good parent is somebody who makes their child feel heard and seen. So it's kind of a gift that you have that I don't think a lot of people always get to experience, which is like having a full conversation with one or both of their parents and realizing that like you are understood.
I'm glad that I can provide that for you. I mean, I try to work really hard. There was a time where, yeah, you would say something, I'd be like, oh my God. But now I try to understand a little bit more of where that's coming from. Also, when you were younger, it felt like sometimes you would say things just to try and get a response from me and just to see, like, push my buttons and just see, like, what I was going to do. And I frequently fell for that. I'd let myself kind of be brought in. But you and I think a lot alike about many things. Even just kind of how we process things. Like, I look at how your dad processes things versus how the two of you or the two of us do. And, God bless him, the poor guy, like he doesn't kind of understand how our minds think.
And like
Tries, but
I mean, I got a lot of amazing qualities from him as well. I
oh,
think that my like love for out of the box things is something that I get from him, and that's also one of my favorite things about myself is like my ability to like try new crafty or artistic things because I don't necessarily think that's in your wheelhouse.
no. Well, and your kindness, like your kindness and your empathy and compassion, like your dad is the kind of person, he would literally, I mean, I know people always say this, but he would literally take the shirt off of his back or drive 100 miles if one of his friends needed it. And you're the same kind of person, whereas I'm not quite as willing to do that and put myself out there as much, but he will. Like without question, it doesn't like, and I'll be thinking like, oh, really? Like, I don't know where I don't want to, but I don't think he ever thinks like that. He thinks like, you know what, this is my buddy. They would do it for me in a heartbeat. Of course I'm gonna be there for them.
Now, one thing I've been trying to ask everyone who comes on, and I'm pretty sure I've only had one guest so far at the time that this is filmed. I don't know if you've heard of the whole concept of eras. So right now I'm in my pivoting era. What era would you say you're in?
I don't know. And I have heard you ask that question before, so I guess I should have been prepared. I might be in the era of embracing who I am.
And what do you think has like led you to that point and how does it feel to be at that point in your life?
I think you just get to a point in your life where you get tired of being judged for things that you aren't or things that other people think that you are. And you just kind of, to a certain extent, you're like, yeah, I'm going to be 54 next month. And I kind of am who I am, but it's not a bad person. I'm a pretty nice person. I'm a pretty generous person. I don't have to be all those other things. And I also think like when I get caught up in trying to be those things, that it ends up really hurting me ultimately and sometimes the people that I love.
I also feel like we might have been talking about this yesterday, but in terms of perspective, like other people's perspective and how they see you, like in somebody's story, you're going to be a hero. In
Mhm.
somebody's story, you're going to be a villain. It's all based on their life experiences and how they perceive you. And sometimes there's really nothing you can do to shift that view. I think I'm not fully at the point yet where I don't care.
Well, that's hard. That's really hard to accept that. I mean, Sally, who I was telling you about before, Sally just decided one day Sally didn't like me and hasn't talked to me in 20 years willingly. I mean, I've run into Sally here and there, and Sally will be polite, and Sally's not mean, but Sally made it clear that Sally didn't want to be my friend. And, it's weighs heavy on my heart even to this day. And there's nothing I can do that will ever change that.
So I think that goes back to like the evolution of friendships conversation I was having. And do you think that it's easy to get to the point where you no longer care about friendships that you no longer have anymore?
No, no, I don't think it is at all. I think you always feel like there's a loss. I mean, especially like you look back on those really good times or those moments of closeness or moments where you were just confiding in one another. And I think in that moment, it just felt so great to have somebody who was your advocate, who, loved you and you could trust with that information about yourself and just accepted it. Right. And that's part of what made that moment special. So I think sometimes when we lose those friendships or they come to an end, it's heartbreaking because you're kind of saying goodbye to future moments like that.
I know, like, a lot of times you say that you see a lot of, like, your younger self in me. How would you, if you were talking to your younger self, recommend moving forward or moving past that friendship heartbreak?
I mean, it will be okay. It's always gonna bother you, but your people, your tribe, whatever you want to call them, you're gonna find them eventually. And that doesn't mean that they're always gonna be your tribe, right? Some people will come and go in your lives, and sometimes that's really sad. But what you have to do is to try to enjoy what you have at that moment. And I think it's even okay to look back on those old friendships and, feel a little bit of sadness that that's gone. But there are so many people out there in this world that will cherish you and will really see how special you are and what makes you so unique and special and the heart that you have. It's just a matter of finding those people. It's kind of like, finding the right person you're going to spend your life with, right? That's not an easy thing. It may look easy to some people, but it's not. And then even in those moments, like even once I met your dad, there are still times where you're like, this guy. And then there are moments where I'm like, my gosh, how do I get to be so lucky to be with this person who is just so unbelievable amazing? Now your dad will disagree with me on that. But I believe that there are ebbs and flows in life. And, he's like, oh, I never feel that way. And I'm like, I don't know, sometimes you just feel like it's not that you don't love the person, but it's different from moments where you just look at them and you're like, oh my God, wow, this person is unbelievable. And I think those moments pass, but I think it's what you choose to do in those moments that makes all the difference.
Yeah, if you decide to continue to put in the effort and
Yeah.
pull out.
Yeah.
That's kind of what makes a successful relationship is if both parties are willing to put in that effort and not give up when times get hard.
And it's the same thing with a friendship, right? I mean, your dad has his best friend from when he was 5 years old. All I know from the person I was 5 years old is my siblings. And sometimes I get really jealous of that. Like I'm sure that they've had moments where they're completely disgusted with each other or whatever. But, all your dad would have to do is pick up the phone and your Uncle Tim would be there in a heartbeat.
If you could talk to your younger self, what advice or things would you say?
It gets better. It gets better. That's probably the biggest one that, not everything is always going to be this hard. That we don't know why things happen, but at some point you'll be able to look back and see like this was a good thing for XYZ reason. Even at those moments where it just feels like you don't even want to get out of bed.
So, do you think that the hard times are worth it in the end?
Absolutely.
How did you navigate through moments in your life that were turbulent?
Good question.
Like, how do you continue to tell yourself that eventually things are going to get better in moments where it feels like overwhelming or there's just a bunch of darkness in that moment?
Well, to me, I think that that's just a matter of faith. And I'm not necessarily talking about God. I think you have to believe that things are going to get better. Otherwise, you're just going to become so desolate, right? If you don't have that hope, if you don't have that faith, if you can't see and evaluate, like, what steps can I take to move myself forward? And it's not easy every day, don't get me wrong. And then I think the older you get, you have had times in your life where life really sucked. And so you can look back and go, no, that day was like the worst day of my life, but I got through it. And so I know that I can get through this too. I may not want to go through it, but I can. And I know that I'm going to look back at it in 5 years or a year or whatever and go like, oh yeah, all right, that was maybe the lesson that I had to learn, or this is how I grew and became better because that happened to me.
How do you work through moments of self-doubt? Or is that something you've never struggled with?
I did a lot more when I was younger, but I think, I work in a field that's predominantly male dominated. Back when I started working, like, I would be the only woman in the room frequently. And so part of it is, you read things, you have mentors, you find other people who are successful in that area who, in my case, were females. And you try to see what about them that you want to embody, or how did they make it, or what did they do, or what wouldn't they do again? Necessarily, or maybe where would they draw that line? And part of what I try to do now is I try to coach people that are younger than me to, for instance, I had a conversation with one of my team members today about sitting at the table, literally sitting at the table. Because as women, we're taught to kind of like go sit in the corner, go sit against the wall, like what you say shouldn't be as important, but it is. And so you need to put yourself forward in order for others to see that you value yourself. And sometimes it's fake it till you make it. And sometimes you sit at the table and you're like, oh dear God, I hope nobody tells me, like, get out this seat, it's mine. And sometimes you look around at the table and you're like, yeah, these people aren't any better than I am.
Like, I had a friend on Ellie, and she kind of had like a book recommendation or something she does in order to continuously be working on herself. Do you have any sort of recommendation, either book wise or practice wise, in order to kind of get to a more improved version of self?
So I am a person who, much like yourself, throws myself in wholeheartedly when I do something. And so, for instance, a couple weeks ago, we got this little greenhouse. And instead of me just going out and planting like, 50 seedlings, I think I planted like 1,000. And your dad and I were talking, and I'm like, oh, does this surprise you? Planted 360 seedlings of this one item. And he goes, no, I mean, that's kind of who you are. Like if you decide you're going to do something, you are, let's go all in, let's make it a success. Let's, hopefully they're still alive at home and
Yeah.
watered them. I hope you watered them. But I try really hard to temper that because, for instance, like the last time when I lost a bunch of weight, like I would go spinning 2, 3 hours a day. I would go out walking. Like it became kind of
An addiction?
yes, or something where if I didn't execute on that activity, then I would give myself negative self-talk. So now, I'm trying to lose a little bit more weight, but I'm trying to do it more methodically, more sustainable, more so I can live and not have that negativity in my life or that cloud hanging over my head.
How do you go about removing that negative self-talk, though?
I mean, it's hard. I mean, you've talked to me at moments where you're like, Mom, you tell me, blah, blah, blah. Don't worry about the size, worry about how you feel that you look or whatever. And yet you're worried because you're a size, whatever. And that's true. I think we all have our moments where we fall back into that. But, I try to look at the greater picture, like, who's determining what size pant size I should wear? Right? If it's society is telling me that I need to be in a certain pant size, well, that's completely different than my doctor saying, like, oh, honey, like you're putting some pressure on your heart. You're going to have a heart attack. You're going to have this and that and the other. I mean, I think you just try to learn and you seem like, whoa, I went, completely and totally all out on this. And, the result was, I gained all that weight back. So clearly that didn't work for me. So what could I do that maybe is a little bit different?
Do you think that once you focused on your mental health, it helped you conquer more of that physical aspect?
Maybe. I mean, or maybe just not fixating on so much on that one particular element, but, giving myself a little bit of grace and being able to say, you know what, who cares what size pants your butt is in today? Right? I mean, why do I care what the neighbor thinks about what size clothes I wear? Right? I mean, like I said, it's one thing if my doctor says something, but as long as it's not a health issue, I don't care, or I care a lot less. Right? I mean, nobody wants somebody to think that they're, ugly or stupid or whatever. Calling me stupid doesn't make me stupid.
Yeah.
Telling me I'm ugly doesn't make me ugly. What I would say to you, like, if somebody calls you an elephant, it doesn't make you an elephant. Unless I buy in that all of a sudden I'm an elephant now. So they need me to allow them to make me feel that way.
Do you have any other final thoughts or piece of conversation that you'd like to share?
I'm gonna miss you. I was really hard when you left to move out here, but I was really proud of you. We're very proud of you. I see so much of, yes, I see a lot of myself in you at that age, but I also see a strength in you that I don't think that I had. And I'm very envious of that.
It's funny you say that because I don't always feel strong.
And that's okay. You're not always supposed to feel strong.
Sorry, everyone. We were interrupted. I think we were kind of just on closing remarks. So I just want to thank my mom for not only coming to visit me, but for coming on the pod. And I think I put this up, but I have created a email account for the Rediscovery Journal. For the Rediscovery Journal. So if you have any feedback or any specific topics you want covered, as well as just maybe anonymous personal stories you want to go into, if you want me to share it on the pod,
Ooh,
go ahead
like
and
that.
send it over. I'll keep everything, anonymous or whatever
Can I share anonymous personal stories about you?
that I'll tell.
But then nobody would know it was you because it would be an anonymous personal story. Who would think you were telling your own? I'm
Okay.
just saying.
Well,
That might be a little bit weird.
okay.
That's another podcast, perhaps.
So anyway,
She's gonna cut this out.
Anyway, thank you for spending your whatever night listening to this.
Well, day. Now you hear?
Okay.